Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who is joining us live, and also to those who may be watching this recording at a later time. My name is Anthony Satiro, and I'm pleased to serve as the technical lead for this panel of the Global Symposium on AI, Education, Language, and Society, organized by the International Research Center on AI and the Technical Research Group at the Federal University of Sergipe, Brazil. I would like to welcome Raimundo Santana, who will serve as the moderator of this panel, introduce our guests, and also explain how the Q&A section will work at the end. I wish everyone an excellent event. Hi,
Hi, Anthony. Thank you.
and now hand over to you. I will stay here providing support, okay?
Thank you. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. My name is Raimundo Santana. I am a doctoral student at Federal University of Sergipe here in Brazil, and I'm also a researcher member of the research group named LINC, and I'll be moderating this panel. I would like to introduce our panelists, Dr. Ana Karina de Oliveira Nascimento, Dr. Rodrigo Abrantes da Silva, and Dr. Bill Cole. So thank you for accepting the invitation. Welcome. It's an honor to be here with you, and you are such inspiring scholars. So our section will work as follows. Each panelist will have up to 30 minutes to answer the central question of this symposium, which is, how is artificial intelligence transforming educational, linguistic, and or social practice in your country or field of research? And what challenges emerge from this process? At the end, we'll have a question and answer section with questions directed to each of them. To our viewers, as you follow each presentation, you might send your questions through the YouTube chat, indicating which panelist you would like to answer them. And at the end of all the presentations, I will share the questions submitted. I will introduce each panelist at the moment of their presentation, and at the end, I will invite everyone back on screen so we can begin the question and answer section and move it towards to closing of this panel. Okay, so to our guests, please note that when there is 1 minute left for each presentation, the panel leader will bring me back on screen so I can continue the moderation. Okay, so let's begin with our first panelist, Dr. Ana Karina de Oliveira Nascimento. Hi, welcome. Are you ready?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction.
Okay, Ana Karina de Oliveira Nascimento is a professor in the Department of Foreign Languages and the Graduate Program in Languages at the Federal University of Sergipe, here in Brazil. She earned her PhD in Languages from the University of São Paulo, which included a CAPES Fulbright Grant Award at Montclair State University in the USA. She also completed a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, funded by the Brazilian agency named CNPq, and she leads the research group named LINC at UFS, and her main research interests include new digital multiliteracies, teacher education, and more recently, digital colonialism, platformization, and generative artificial intelligence. Thank you once again for accepting our invitation, and I wish you an excellent presentation, Karina.
Thank you, Raimundo, for the presentation, for being here. So now you need to help me share my screen. Let me see. Oh, there you are. Did I do that? Oh, great. Okay. So to begin with, so I'm going to start my presentation. Let me check the time. Just a second. I'm going to start the presentation with this main question of the symposium, which relates, I think we have some key ideas there, or key words, which are AI, transformation, and challenges. So I think those words are the main concerns, or the main things I'll be talking about, and more specifically trying to connect the question, trying to answer the question, thinking about the Brazilian context, but also considering other contexts I have contact with, because we are, as I believe, we are a result of all those and to change all those opportunities we have for sharing and learning with everybody. So that's my name, and I will start. First of all, I would like to thank all the organizing committee of this conference, and I would like to tell you guys that it's been a wonderful days. I had a great time yesterday watching the panels, and congratulations on doing this huge, I know the huge amount of work it involves. And so, Paulo Boa Sorte, who is the leading this committee, thank you very much for the invitation, and congratulations on organizing the whole conference. And I would like to say also that I'm really grateful to be sharing this panel with Rodrigo and Dr. Cope. So Dr. Abrantes and Dr. Cope are two wonderful scholars that I admire a lot. So it's great to be talking to you both here this afternoon. And also, thank you, Hai. Hai is my doctoral student. So thank you for being moderating this session. And you know I have problems with time, so do not hesitate to say my time's up. So thank you all for being here, the ones who are watching on YouTube as well. So to begin with, so I'll try to introduce to you guys a little bit about who I am and how I got to talk about the transformation and challenges of AI in all those aspects mentioned in the question. So first of all, so you can see all those symbols up there. So as Raimundo mentioned, I'm a professor at the Federal University of Sergipe, Department of Foreign Languages and graduate program in languages. So my whole background is in languages, and I've been teaching English for quite a while now. And the main idea, or my main concern, or what I like the most, is working with pre-service teachers and in-service teachers. So teacher education is what I love doing, right? And I'm the leader of LINC, which is a research group that connects to literacies. So we discuss literacy in general, so literacy studies, so multiliteracies, digital literacies, and I am also part of the International Center of Literacies and Intercultural Studies here at the University of Sergipe. And I had the opportunity, as Raimundo mentioned, to work with Dr. Cope at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. So I have to acknowledge the support, thanks to CNPq, which is a Brazilian funding agency. So I had the opportunity to spend one academic year there, and that was really important for my career, for learning about AI, and for deepening the studies, the readings, the papers I already have, or the knowledge I already had on multiliteracies. So thank you. And going there, I had the chance to become part of the cyber scholar group and the cyber social lab, which is a group of the group is the leader of the group is Dr. Cope and Dr. Calantes, but there is a whole representation of the world. So people from all over the places in the world. They get together to discuss interesting topics concerning education, technology, and so on. So I have this cyberscholar.ai there, and I'll be talking about it later. So generally speaking, I have been done research on literacies, multiliteracies, as you can see there. And most recently, after the pandemic, I got interested in diving on digital colonialism, especially due to what I saw, we all lived here in Brazil and in our universities, as to the adoption of different platforms, which were not educational ones, and how we are dependent upon them. And most recently, especially during and after my postdoctoral experience abroad, I started diving into the AI studies, Gen AI more specifically, and the cybersocial learning perspective. And during this postdoctoral experience, I think that what really called my attention was that the group of researchers, we were not only doing research, but we were also, while doing research, thinking about platform design, how we could design and improve a platform using AI that had the pedagogical idea that we wanted in it. So it was the first time I had experience in development, platform development, and that was a very rich experience. And I think it somehow leads to what I'm going to talk about today. Okay, so thank you all for watching. So first of all, so here, as I mentioned, teacher education has been my main focus for some time. So I have pictures of me in the classroom at the university. Then I had a huge interest in digital literacy, especially during my PhD with Dr. Valkyria Montemor, who was my supervisor, and then in the US with Dr. Michelle Noble, who is also there, and as a group that is part of the National Literacy Project. So that's a huge group. And most recently, multiliteracies and AI literacies. So you can see a photo of me, that's the one on the right, at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, with Dr. Cope and some of the students there. So this is just to tell you a bit about my academic journal. And then in terms of AI and Gen AI, the first contact I had with the topic was through some publications, some local publications, which I'm very proud of. One by my friend and colleague, Paulo Boassorte. So the first one when he published in 2021. So it was the first one I read about the topic. And then all the papers that came, I'm mentioning only one here, which was published in 2023. And Alessandra Elizabeth dos Santos, so Santos, is there. And she has an amazing dissertation that has been published. So I think you all should read it. And then I also learned a lot by personal use. And then one day I saw my daughter using Gen AI for school. And then during my postdoctoral experience, I could dive a little bit deeper on how we could think of Gen AI in schools, pedagogically, on an educational platform, and so on. So this is just an interface of the Cyberscholar. I'm sure Dr. Cope will be talking about that, so I'm not going to dive deep on it. Just so you see it, if you want, you can visit cyberscholar.ai and you can see more about it. So during the postdoctoral experience, we had the chance to not only read papers related to higher education, which was my main focus before, just both in Brazil and abroad, but I also had the chance to do some research on K-12 education involving Gen AI in schools. And that experience gave me the chance to publish some papers which I'll be talking about shortly, because they relate to what or how I see what's going on in Brazil. So the first one is actually a case study. It was the first school we went to there in the US, and we had we tried to understand how Gen AI would support students writing tasks. But I have to say that that was not any AI, but it was a specific AI generated feedback. So through Cyber Scholar, the platform, Gen AI was calibrated based on teachers' rubric, teachers' materials, and what the teacher wanted students to produce. So based on teachers' work, basically. So as Dr. Calantzis usually says, it's not AI in the wild, but it was calibrated AI, so students would use intentionally, pedagogically, considering what the teacher had told us as researchers and developers that the platform should provide. So this experience showed me the importance of calibration, the importance of teachers' work, and the importance of getting to know what the teacher is doing and then thinking about AI from that point. And the main findings we could observe were related to how this rubric aligned feedback was more meaningful to students. So based on what they said through focus groups interventions, but also based on their work. So what they had before, what they had after Gen AI, and how they viewed that experience. Then later we published two more papers, this time involving 4 schools, and checking how Gen AI would support students writing tests. So again, specific AI generated feedback through Cyber Scholar. And this one specifically is it's a practice oriented account of the implementation. So we document what happened, the decisions we took, the ethical strategies we followed, how the teacher got prepared to work with AI in the classroom, how the teachers, and also the importance of classroom mediation. So how the teacher would mediate the work with AI. So the key findings suggest that using rubric aligned Gen AI systems may increase the visibility of assessment criteria, and also that it depends a lot on teacher mediation and on how the teacher knows how to deal with AI, how to develop, how to use it pedagogically. This is also published in Portuguese if you want to check. So this last one. And when I got back to Brazil, I was really curious to know how those things were taking place in our country. So I checked with the Internet Committee data, this survey that had been conducted in both 2024 and 2025. So 2024, one thing that called my attention was the growth in the number of Internet users in our country. And the numbers are 85% of the urban population and 74% of the rural population. So we Brazilians, we are Internet users, most of us. And then the 2025 survey added one element. Participants were asked about the use of Gen AI in their homes. And the survey found out that it is part of the daily lives of 32% of Brazilians. And it also showed that this use was, concentrated in higher levels, in those of the higher levels of education and income. So this really caught my attention. And then, because of that, I went back to the survey on education in Brazil. And the 2024 data show that 37% of our students, they use Gen AI platforms in research and for school activities. And that most of them, as mentioned previously, they are in high school. So they are up there, so higher levels of education. And of those, 43, so considering still education, but when it comes to teachers, K-12 teachers, 43% of them used Gen AI to help them plan classes. But what really strikes me here is that even though we have this number, it's not half of the school population, but still it's a good number. We only 19% of students talked to teachers about how to use it in school activities. So it's like there is still a taboo. It's not the kind of thing I would talk to my teacher about. And of those 19% who talked to their teachers, only 33% received guidance on how to identify incorrect, false, biased content. So, as I see, I think the numbers tell us there is a big asymmetry when we compare practical adoption by students and critical versus critical mediation on the part of the teachers. So as a teacher educator, I got really curious about knowing more about Brazil. So I, together with Rodrigo, who will be talking later, and Professor Veronica, we conducted a research and experience in K-12 in high school in São Paulo. So this time 16 students were involved. And we were focusing on how the Gen AI used, so we used Cyber Scholar, so it was an implementation, how it would transform students' literacy practices and how we would visualize pedagogical mediation. And the main results, they showed us that we need, the technical sophistication was really important, but it was not only that. There was more that we could visualize. So one of the things that we realized was that students, it pretty much depended on students' main attitude and students' agency. And then we came up with 4 strategies or 4 kinds of students we could visualize from the data we gathered. And they were, they behaved as pragmatic reviser. So when they only performed surface correction, or they behaved as selective revisers, so the ones who would prioritize some specific part of the feedback and then strategically work on it, on the text. And we also viewed some who were transformative revisers. So they self-directed their own rewriting. They went deep on the feedback that Gen AI generated. And there were also those who were non-revisers at all. So those who had a very passive behavior. Rodrigo will be talking about this, I mean, in more, he's going to explain more details, but just so you know, the comparison I wanted to have with the context I had just lived in the US. So this is still to be published. But then I went back to class. So that's why my trajectory is important here, because I'm trying to tell you a story on how I see those transformations, I mean, my personal, professional, academic life, and the challenges that are also present. So when I went back to class after 1 year, I'm still conducting some studies with Cyber Scholar involving my graduate students and also my undergraduate students. And I could see some of the transformations that are taking place both in society, but also in schools and also in academic life. So what what really called my attention was, first of all, in terms of graduate students, they mentioned, and I could observe that as well, that school students are using Gen AI, but there is still a whole lack of knowledge on the part of teachers. When it came to undergraduate students, they seem to use Gen AI most as pragmatic or non-revisers, considering the categories I mentioned earlier that we got to, both Rodrigo and I. So they still need a lot to move on and to become critical, to go deep on what Gen AI provides. And then what really calls my attention as a teacher educator is the fact that the tasks designed for students nowadays, they need to be rethought, and our attitude and so on. So, and that relates to some of the challenges we face. So Nina Daora mentioned yesterday, I brought this citation, but that's basically what she said in her conference yesterday, that when we are dealing with statistical model method, so it's a huge database based on statistics and prediction. So this is a challenge if we think of human relations, if we think of our field of study as linguists, as applied linguists. So this is something we should consider. Also, some challenges, as she also mentioned yesterday, relate to facts such as sourcings, that the machine buries sources, so the machine can have no notion of empirical truth, no conception of a theoretical frame, and also, and most importantly, I think ethics is something we should really worry about, and especially when we are dealing with those who become teachers, who will be in a classroom where students are using Gen AI. So the critical dialogue needs that is not present in this machine human interaction needs to be developed as something really important. And also, she also mentioned yesterday that because we are dealing with large language models, these large language models, they have been trained by humans, by a group of people, and they are, therefore, they carry lots of our, in their sources, lots of our problems, or lots of racism, lots of sexism, lots of homophobia. So this is something we have to consider. I would say, answering the question, this is one of the challenges that we have to take into consideration when thinking about Gen AI. Of course, hallucinations is also something else. This is just a funny example a student shared with me. He was using ChatGPT to check who I was. Anyhow, so hallucination is also a possibility, is something we face as a challenge. And I would say, connecting that with my interest in digital colonialism, that we have to consider that those AI platforms, they are complex ecologies. So having the chance to develop teachers AI literacies or critical AI literacies is something that I consider really important, really relevant, extremely relevant, because we are dealing with complex ecologies. We are dealing with AI companies which are market driven and so on. So this is something we should worry about. So it's one of the challenges we should consider. And then this year, more specifically, we started to watch a series of changes in Brazil, and I will be talking about some of them, which that relate to how AI has been seen in the educational context. So, for example, this is a publication that I think must be read from all teachers and teacher educators. And it's the framework for the development and responsible use of AI in education. So I got this from the document, and what the document states is that we have to, whenever working with AI, we have to consider algorithmic bias, because systems, as I mentioned earlier, Nina Daura mentioned yesterday, systems are trained on data sets, and those data sets reflect social and cultural inequalities. And we want to work not to have those asymmetries, right? But to do something different or do something about it. So, according to the document, some actions should take place. And for example, one of the actions that really caught my attention relates to the warning we have against the use of facial recognition for attendance control in schools in Brazil, because this was becoming like very common, and we know there is a lot to consider when we think about this AI. And this is something also Nina mentioned yesterday. Also, one thing that is pretty strong in the document is that when you think about curriculum in Brazil or integrating AI into our curriculum, we should consider learning with AI, but also, and most importantly, learning about AI. So teachers and students need to learn how and understand algorithms, ethics, and the social impacts. In terms of teacher education, we should focus on ethical and creative uses of AI, of course, to help teachers work and not to substitute teachers, right? And one of the things that relates to that is the mandatory human supervision. So according to the document, whatever use we make of AI in our schools, it has to be supervised by the teacher, by a human, by a person from the school. And also, it could be used to focus on equity, like to include students and not to deepen the asymmetries we already have. So this is just an image I created based on my own summary of so Copilot created, AI created, based on my own summary of the document. And I would say that teacher education is the one that really calls my attention, but the guiding principles of ethical, equity, transparency, and data protection are there, and they're crucial, right? And related to that, then we had the next publication, which is this guidelines for the use of artificial intelligence in K-12 education in Brazil. And it highlights again the teaching about AI and the teaching with AI. So about is one item that we should take into account. And together with the document, we had this initiative, which is a course that has been launched this month, also by our Ministry of Education, that takes into account our curriculum, the previously mentioned documents, and the UNESCO documents. So, and the idea is to help teachers develop skills to understand, critically analyze, and integrate AI into their educational practices. And of course, I couldn't forget to mention some of the strategies, local strategies or initiatives that have been transforming how AI enters the educational context in our state. So I have to say that Tecla Group, Paulo Bassorte, congratulations on leading this wonderful group. I think this guide is really important and necessary, and that's one way of academic life going into society and dealing with teachers and trying to help build and transform this new scenario. So to finish, I would say that what I tried to do by telling my story here was how I think AI has been transforming our practices, and how I have been transformed as one of those subjects in society, in the Brazilian society, and the challenges that are also with us and how we could act. And I think we need to act, right? So these are some of the ideas. And I come to those ideas based on my recent experiences with Cyber Scholar, my recent discussions on how to develop or how to think about critical AI literacies, how to rethink teachers' roles and tasks, and having in mind that those large language models, they are trained in a way and therefore they're never neutral. So this is an image just to finish and to let you know and to remind you that I really worry about asymmetries, and we know they are really strong in our country. So what can we do as teachers about that, right? So my references are here. And one more time, thank you all for listening. Thank you, the organizing committee, for getting the three of us together here. And once again, thank you, Dr. Cope, for letting me learn so much on how to develop pedagogically uses of Gen AI. And that's it. Thank you so much. Hi, thank you.
Thank you very much, Karina. That was a very thought-provoking presentation. We appreciate your contributions. And to our viewers, please note that the questions for this presentation are now closed, okay? Now I invite Dr. Rodrigo Abrantes to join us. Are you ready, Rodrigo?
Yes.
So, oops. Rodrigo Abrantes da Silva is a postdoctoral fellow at the Federal University of Sergipe, where his work focuses on multiliteracies, learning design, and digital technologies applied to education. He holds a PhD in literacies from the University of São Paulo, and he has published on multimodal design, teacher education, and generative artificial intelligence in education, receiving 2 Excellence Awards for his research. Currently, he investigates generative artificial intelligence applications for education as a member of the Cybersocial Research Group, TECLA, and also the National Literacies Project. He is the author of the book New Literacies, New Learning, Cybersocial Pedagogies in the Brazilian Context. So welcome, Rodrigo. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Rai. Let me share my screen. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So my topic here is student agency in AI-mediated writing. And my objective is to give more context and detail about the case study we did at a private school here in São Paulo, a private but a not-for-profit school. And first of all, I want to thank everyone here for supporting me reach here. It's very good to work with you all. And my topic here is a continuation of my doctoral research. I reported my doctoral findings through this book. I published a Portuguese version by Pontes Editores and the English version by the Common Ground Research Networks, who did an amazing job with the process of publication. And since my doctoral research, I started to follow Köppen-Calantz's proposal of the cybersocial era, the cybersocial theory, and in particular, because this gives to me a way of thinking the relation between humans and machine different than we find in the common discourses of big tech, for instance, of the artificial intelligence field. So this is a way of thinking that situates the human in relation to the machine, to the technology, as two different forms of intelligence. And I think this is a very strong way to structure humans' relation in a kind of complementary in relation to technologies. If we compare the artificial intelligence vision with the cybersocial, we see here that from the artificial intelligence perspective, it can be the same as human intelligence. the idea that general artificial intelligence is coming. And this is the idea that it can replicate human intelligence. And we see this kind of discourse in the big tech discourses. But learning here is statistical, as Karina said, in layers of binary notation. The cybersocial view, by the other hand, human senses and binary coding machines are profoundly different. It's a relationship between two fundamentally different thinking mechanisms. In this perspective, learning is biosocial, embodied, and material. And here, just to situate this discussion in a historical perspective, we are in a turning point in the cybersocial era, in the digital society, if we compare with other moments of history, as the creation of writing or the creation of the press. So we can move now to the details of the case study we implemented here in São Paulo. First, I propose to answer this question: why a guided present implementation? And we have four topics here to answer this. First of all, a historical turning point. As Cope and Calantis argue, generative AI is the third literacy revolution, a paradigm shift in how writing is produced. So we are facing a different way to the material production of texts, and we need to learn how to deal with this. At the time of the implementation, we identified a research gap. Scientific output on Gen AI in Brazilian-based education is still incipient. Most existing studies are theoretical, and empirical implications are rare. The third topic is a temporal lag. Students already use Gen AI freely, as Karina showed us. ChatGPT and other models transform the student literacies before any pedagogical framework could catch up. And a cybersocial question. Instead of enthusiasm, a critical enthusiasm or rejection, this study asks, how can human agency and computational capability complement each other? So to move on this, we use the cybersocial perspective to frame a research methodology, combining a design-based research on education with agile methodology, a kind of methodology used to software development. And we did this based on three principles. First, the complementarity. Human cognition and computational processing do not compete. They complement each other in functional asymmetry. Second, distributed agency. Agency resides not in students or system alone, but emerges from socio-technical interaction. And iterative methodology. Research actively intervenes in phenomena through cycles of design, implementation, and evaluation. From the side of the study design, we had 16 students, first years of secondary schools, bilingual Brazilian-Italian program. We chosen this Brazilian-Italian program just because we have small groups of students, and we feel more comfortable in following a small group of students first. We propose to these students to play three roles during the research process as participants: user testers, technical analysts, and co-researchers or theorizers. We did this to motivate students to thinking in good feedback for us. And we have two texts. We have version 1 that students wrote without AI assistant. Then they received the cyber feedback, and then they wrote version 2. And we have all this process documented to analyze in the case studies. We did all this in 3 phases. We have the preparation phase, In this phase, we work with the teachers of the Brazilian-Italian program to teach them about Cyber Scholar. Then we have the implementation and the evaluation. Here is the small group of students. We have this data collection, text version 1 and version 2, AI feedback, focus group, and surveys. Here is the focus group, a moment of a more informal conversation for students to see their vision, to share their vision about Cyber Scholar, to talk about their perceptions, their reactions to the system. It was very insightful moment. And here I will explain a little bit more about the methodology we use to analyze this data set. The comparisons between version 1 and version 2 were conducted with the assistance of GenAI, as well as the analytical interlacing method, Professor Boassorte theory proposal, aligned with Santos' approach to AI-augmented qualitative analysis. We take the version 1 and version 2 texts, and we used artificial intelligence to track students' editings of the texts. And we did this using the interlacing method embedded into an artificial intelligence to assist us in the categorization of this material. And based on these results, we have some findings to share. A first group of findings show us that some patterns of engagements. The central finding here is the importance of student agency in this process of interaction with artificial intelligence in a system designed to situate students as creator of knowledge. We have here an analysis of 8 papers comparing version 1 and version 2. And we have here different levels of engagement with the cyber review. Before move on, I want to propose here a definition of agency based on Anger, Montemor, and Landin, expanded to this digital scenario in which we have humans and artificial intelligence. Student agency in generative AI contexts can be defined as a socially mediated and technologically expanded capacity to act within hybrid learning ecosystems. Expanding upon the views of Wenger, Montemor, and Landin, this agency is not merely the execution of commands, but a praxeological and epistemological challenge. It concerns the student's competencies in negotiating meanings and maintaining subjectivity when facing binary coding machines. In this scenario of unprecedented times, learner agency manifests as the ability to inhabit the porosity between the human and the machine, transforming AI interaction into a critical, reflective, and situated social practice that subverts the mere automation of thought in favor of a socially anchored authorship. So we have now the second group of findings in which we analyze the focus group. We transcribe all the conversation and we analyze what happened there. And students recognize, by one side, they recognize the potential of the system. That version of the system is good to say here because we have now other version of the system running. And at that time, students says that the agility and practicality of the feedback was valorized. The fact that the student could access a feedback immediately, the ability to follow the system, to follow rubric criteria, and they see a democratizing potential here related to the access to feedback. And also they identified some limitations. at that version of the system. For example, misses unwritten rules in human context, excessively long and detailed feedback. Some feedbacks were longer than students' piece of texts, and difficulty with cultural nuances and idiomatic expression. We identify analyzing version 1 and version 2 of students' texts and how they interact with the cyber reviewer. We identify some for revision profiles. We related this to manifestations of students' agency. The first one we analyzed as a pragmatic reviser, and we think there are a limited agency here. Students focused almost exclusively on explicit corrections, grammar and vocabulary, acts as an error corrector rather than structural reviser. For example, when students implemented all 7 grammatical corrections in Italian completely, but completely ignored the experience criterion. The second profile is the selective reviser. We think that this is a kind of strategic agency. Students here identifies and addresses the most structurally significant gap, leaving peripheral suggestions aside. They show sophisticated understanding of genre. For example, one student added the only closing recommendation to her Great Gatsby review, the one structurally essential move for the genre, but ignored the rest. And we have the transformative reviser, and we see here a kind of critical agency. Students here act as mini makers, as designers. They go beyond corrections, restructures arguments, adds personal experiences, incorporate external data, use feedback as catalysts. And at last, we have the non-reviser, absent agency. Students does not engage substantively with feedback, even when detailed. We think in this case that this reveals the structural conditions that constrain agency development. And we relate this, it's our hypothesis, that this could signal historical inheritance of technicist pedagogy, as Montemor argued. So, in this agency topic, we see 4 dimensions of agency operating in students' behavior in this process of interacting with the writing assistants. We see that a kind of critical evaluation. Students assess AI feedback as situated, as machine perspective and not absolute true. They recognize biases and contextual limits of the system. Then we have, we saw metacognitive awareness. AI feedback here acts as a mirror that makes visible writing patterns the author's familiarity would normally hide. This is a way to visualize students' thinking. And then we have the affective engagement, balancing trust in one's authorial judgment with openness to external perspective, resisting both a critical dependency and defensive rejection. And we have the sociocultural navigation, negotiating between institutional, conventional, and personal voice, especially relevant, I think, in Brazilian contexts where technicist pedagogy historically privileged adjustment over transformation. So I want to discuss a specific topic now that we call the calibration paradox. And before I explain that, I want to highlight here that this is the interface, the actual interface of the Cyber Scholar system. And when we talk about calibration for the teacher side, we are talking about two resources. Here we have the knowledge bases. Teachers can use this to organize data collections, texts, theories, examples of students writing, examples of teachers' corrections, teachers' feedback, all the learning context materialized in texts that could serve to the system to calibrate the way the system will interact with the students. And we have the rubric agents. Here, we can design the criteria that students will use to writing and that the system will use to interact with the students. This is the calibration process from the side of the teacher. And what we called here the calibration paradox is that a misalignment become pedagogical in these case studies. I explain. We didn't have enough time with the teachers of the Italian curriculum to build strong knowledge bases and better improve the rubrics criteria. So we need to improvise something. I built some knowledge base as references based on the teacher's writing proposal. And the rubric criteria, I think, could be more improved, but we didn't have time. So we didn't stop because of this, and we move on with the research. And what happened is the Cyber Scholar implementation used a partial calibration in these experiences. No Italian or English is examples, strong examples in the Hague knowledge bases. And when feedback misaligned with local cultural conventions, students were forced to articulate and defend their stylistic choices, developing, we think, a meta-linguistic awareness. So we derive a question based on this. This is a kind of productive friction, we think. The same limitations that could have been a barrier become a catalyst for critical thinking. The question is, how do we design systems sufficiently calibrated to be useful, yet sufficiently foreign to provoke critical thinking? We don't have the answer. In our case study, we have students who transformed this friction into productivity because they had cultural capital, linguistic competencies, and qualified teacher mediation. But for the students with less cultural capital or without adequate support, the same friction could generate frustration or a critical dependency. This reinforced that technical calibration matters as an equity issue, not just a usability issue. And we draw this representation based on our analysis of the research results. We saw a complementary triad. This is a kind of framework we derive for our analysis. We see that the Cyber Scholar allowed this situation. A pedagogically calibrated Gen AI, a student critical agent, and a teacher as designer. If you have these three dimensions working together, you can provide a good experience, a good cyber social literacy to your students. And here I have just some suggestions about what we think in relation to teachers' role in this era of Gen AI. First, teacher must to act as a kind of pedagogical curator, select, adapt, and contextualize AI tools for specific objectives, maintain knowledge bases dynamically. Second, critical mediator. Teachers must help students navigate tensions between machine standardization and individual expression, validate stylistic choices that AI may challenge. Third, the metacognitive facilitator. A teacher here can develop a student's capacity for self-assessment and strategic use of multiple feedback sources. teachers when to accept, reject, or adapt AI suggestions. And for the experienced designer, teacher can create activity that productively integrate human capabilities, creativity, cultural judgment, and computational ones, systematic analysis, and immediate feedback. And we have some implications and recommendations for educators, developers, and administrators. For the side of educators, redesign feedback practices to distribute responsibilities between human and machine, and move from sole feedback provider to designer of system and analysis of students' appropriations. For developers, prioritize user-oriented customization, allow students to understand how feedback is generated, and enable pedagogical calibration through prompts, rubrics, and localized knowledge bases. For administrators, treat technological infrastructure as a learning equity condition, not a technical detail. Provide continuous teacher education that transcends instrumental training, and invest in competencies for pedagogical calibration, not just platform use. This calibration, I think it's essential for us here in Global South, because large language models are trained with most global North data. And in the calibration process, we can remediate this by insert our local cultural texts. So my conclusions here, I have just 4 topics and I finished. We have a textual transformation is relational. It emerges not from individual attributes alone, but from the socio-technical environment that enables critical agency to manifest. The Gen AI strange mirror. AI reflects text from unprecedented angles, unexpected angles, sometimes revealing, sometimes imposing cultural inadequate criteria. The pedagogical task is cultivating selective and informed appropriations. Agency for Gen AI use. It is the pedagogical objective to be developed through critical use of Gen AI. Cyber Scholar is, in this sense, infrastructure for an agency pedagogy. And this search captured an initial moment. Students demonstrated that they are not victims of technological determinism, but agents capable of shaping technological integrations, offering insights into human-machines co-intelligence. Thank you very much for your attention. This was the results we had to share with you.
Thank you, Rodrigo, for such an insightful and engaging presentation. Now I invite Dr. Bill Cope from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign to join us. Hi, Dr. Bill.
Hey, how are you, everybody? Yeah, great to hear those talks. Oh, what can I say after those talks? You were very comprehensive, and yeah. So you.
Hi, Bill. Bill Copes is a professor in the Department of Education, Policy, Organization, and Leadership in the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. His and America Lance's recent research has focused on development of digital writing and assessment technologies, with the support of a number of major grants from the U.S. Department of Education, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the National Science Foundation. He has co-authored and co-edited with America Lance's New Learning, Elements of Science of Education, published by Cambridge University Press in 2008, and third edition 2022. Literacies, published by Cambridge University 2 in 2012, second edition 2016, and the 2 volumes Grammar of Multimodal Meaning, Making Sense and Adding Sense, published by Cambridge in 2020. His recent research has focused on artificial intelligence, both in semiotic theory and education practice. So, Bill, welcome. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction there. And just before I get started, thank you very much to Karina and Rodrigo for those great talks. I'm honored by the fact that you folks have picked up so much in terms of the ideas that we've been working on. It's been an honor to have you as part of our research lab and as part of our whole process. So what I'm conscious of, that a lot of what I was going to say, they've said all right. They've said already, and I've probably said it better than I have. So I will go ahead and present, but also what I'll do is perhaps skip over a few bits where they've already spoken to these ideas. So I will share my screen. Is that now sharing the PowerPoint window? Is that correct? I will go over here and let's have a look at the whole thing. There we go. So how is that? Can everybody view that okay? All good? You might have to say it with voice because I've got the whole screen. Great. All right, so we've got this idea of cybersocial learning. And the reason why we've developed that idea, and as I say, Rodrigo and Karina have touched on this very well, very clearly, is we wanted to find something which is somewhat different. So anyhow, in this talk, I'm going to talk about the what of cybersocial learning. The first part's kind of theoretical. The why, which is, well, look, this stuff poses a problem for education. And, we really have to kind of address it in one way or another, whether we like it or not. And thirdly, what I'll do a little bit differently from Karina and Rodrigo, who spoke to a lot of the very interesting outcomes of the work they've done with Cyber Scholar, I'll give you a quick demo. I'll take you inside so you can see what it is and how it works. Right, so look, let's start with the basics. And this is the very idea of artificial intelligence. I'm going to begin with a provocative proposition. It's a terrible idea. This is the man who invented the phrase. His name's John McCarthy, a great computer scientist, an extremely influential person in a number of ways. And he thought up this phrase for a funding application for a workshop that they held at Dartmouth College in 1956. He wrote the proposal in 1955. And this is the definition: making a machine behave in ways that would be called intelligent if a human were so behaving. Right, so the basic idea is that these are machines that, there he is playing chess, that can play chess like a human can, that can do things like a human can. And of course, where it leads these days is this idea of artificial and general intelligence. It'll be able to do everything a human can, not just play chess, but also the idea of superintelligence, where it'll be do everything a human can do and more. Now, I'd like to kind of start off at the very beginning by contesting that idea. And the idea that we contest it with is an idea by Norbert Wiener here. There he is, as we do as professors, smoking a cigar in the classroom with his contraptions and his equations. A great scientist at MIT who invented this idea of cybernetics. And I want to try to explain to you why cybernetics or the cyber idea is a different idea, subtly different, importantly different from the idea of artificial intelligence. By the way, if people are interested in the kind of an obscure history of this word, Mary and I have written this paper on the cybernetics of learning, which is there. It's an open access paper, so anyone can get it. So that's kind of a historical background to the term. Now, what I want to mean by cyber is not artificial. So here we have the word cyber comes from the Greek word kybernetes, and the kybernetes is the oarsman at the back there who's actually steering a rudder. And there he is in this particular image on a Greek pot. There's Odysseus who's strapped to the mast of the ship in order not to be tempted by the sirens, and the kybernetes is steering the boat through the dangerous waters, so to speak. So what cyber is about feedback systems. So what in order to go straight ahead, what the oarsman does with the rudder is adjust a little bit one way, adjust a little bit another way. It's always about constant adjustment. So it's not about the machine doing a human's work. It's about the adjustable, continuous feedback relationships between the machine and the human. And we'd like artificial intelligence to be thought about in these ways. It's a very different form of intelligence. Rodrigo said that very nicely just a few moments ago. And what it's about is about the feedback relationships between two very different types of intelligence, rather than the replicability of human intelligence by machines. But I want to take this one step further, actually. And the cyberneticians had this notion of a trivial machine. So a trivial machine is just simply a technology with a social relationship. It's the oarsman and the oar, right, in this particular mold. Likewise, so it's a machine which simply does as it's told in ways which are absolutely predictable. What happens with the Industrial Revolution? I put this in because I want to say that, in fact, what artificial intelligence does now and what machines do is, in some senses, not new. I mean, it's an extension of a whole lot of practices which have happened since the beginning of capitalism, the beginning of modernity, and that what we have is a machine here. This is the Boulton and Watt double-acting steam engine, which was one of the foundational first automated machines of the modern day. But the little device that I've circled there is called the governor. So when there's too much steam coming into the machine, the weights spin out and there's less steam comes into the machine. And when there's not enough, they spin down and more steam is loaded into the machine. So before the governor, what would happen? They'd have to be an operator who, there's too much. I'll reduce the amount of steam. There's not enough. I'll increase them. But the governor is actually delegating a certain degree of agentive autonomy. This is a really important concept as we're talking about AI agents now. A level of agentive autonomy to that device. And by the way, it's a semiotic device, and with two concepts programmed into it: more and less. More steam, less steam. So in a way, this is a paradigmatic beginning of these relationships with what we would call non-trivial machines, and that mechanism is technically called the servo mechanism. Now, this might seem a bit obscure, but I really want to kind of talk about the nature of agentive machinery as part of this philosophical introduction. So here's our definition, which is very different from John McCarthy's definition. Any human meaning, for instance, an action, a deduction, a process that can be delegated to a machine to undertake semi-autonomously. There's the steam engine, which is semi-autonomously. It's only semi-autonomously. It's not completely autonomously, because humans have created the machine and they run the machine. But it's the action of regulating the steam is delegated semi-autonomously. Interestingly, for us as educators, it's actually a machine that has to be taught to do this, and a machine that learns from its environment. Not enough steam, more steam. It's a machine that's being taught and a machine that constantly learns. So one of the very important things for us as educators is these machines are learning machines, and but the mechanics of learning, the process of learning, are very different from human learning. That's the important point. So this is a point which, again, Rodrigo has already made quite nicely. What then are the affordances of computers? So, the binary computer is really a product of the late 1940s. The first computers were not binary, but eventually everything, they're writing machines. They're machines that deal with commands that are written. But they're all written in binary notation, zeros and ones. And in a way, these are the capacities of these machines. They can do all of this and no more, which is whatever can be written in binary notation, a word, a number, an abstract concept, base 2 calculation, 2 of the same thing, 3 of the same thing, 4 of the same thing, fancy stats if you like, and Boolean logic, which is if then. It's in other words, a dualistic, very simple logic, which can be, of course, built along. So that's basically all they can do. And what we do is we put meaningful stuff in things happen in the machine processes them, and the initial stuff comes out. Now, a quick history of AI, which is kind of quite important, and I'm sorry, a lot of what I'm saying now in this intro part is historical, that it's been around for a long time, but in three very, very different types of machine. The first is expert symbolic logical systems, and this is actually the beginnings of computer programming, to be quite frank, writing these command systems, algorithmic systems, where the machine operationalizes things which have been pre-programmed into the machine. This is Alan Turing's Manchester 1 from 48, 49. And right at the very, very beginning, this machine was able to do things that humans couldn't do, like find impossibly large prime numbers, which would take a huge amount of time for a huge number of people to do. So, one of the things about artificial intelligence, in fact, these things have been artificial intelligences from the very beginning in their capacities to do things that humans couldn't reasonably be expected to do. An educational example of that is this is the world's first e-learning system. And interestingly, it's not just a programmed computer, but actually the programmed computer produced programmed learning. And again, if you're interested in this, this was created at the University of Illinois beginning in 1959. So again, these computer-mediated learning systems are by no means new, but this was based on this paradigm of expert systems. Again, there's a paper there if people are interested in the history of this, which is incredibly instructive, to be quite frank. So here we've got kind of this, this is the actual lab over there where it was set up. You've got storage devices, TV. In fact, what you've got on there on the left is a rudimentary version of cloud computing. That's actually what it is. But then in the programming area, what you've got is a set of electronic tutors are a very good example of this, where students can work through, answer questions, get help, error detectors, correct answer, do assessment. So, for many, many decades now, machines within these expert logical systems domains have been able to support human learning. Programmed learning, often in ways which are behaviorist, often in ways which are problematic in pedagogical terms, but nevertheless, it's a lot of what happens in education is still behaviorist. We teach kids things and we ask them to do the test. That's an exercise in behaviorism of one sort or another. So the second age then comes with data-driven systems. And in terms of the mechanism, these are fundamentally different. So what they're about is building huge data sets. This is perhaps one of the most famous, ImageNet. Fei-Fei Li, an American computer scientist, created this thing where she took 22,000 odd categories about things in the world and got those to be annotated and marked around a series of codes. And that's supervised learning. So all the things that, the green stars might be dogs, and the red dots might be ships. And when something comes in with the same pattern of pixels, you can predict that that is a dog or a ship, so to speak. Interestingly, in this era, over down the bottom right-hand corner here, she actually used an Amazon service called Mechanical Turk. A Mechanical Turk was a chess-playing machine from the 18th century where there was actually somebody underneath the machine playing the game. It looked like the automaton at the back was playing the game, but in fact there was a person in there. There's a person in this as well, and the person in this are the people in the developing world or the poorly paid labourers who've labelled millions of things along these ways. But then one example of this technology in use in education is natural language processing, automated writing assessment. So I know folks here are interested in literacy. That's why I've given this as a writing example. And the way it worked was, again, going back to the supervised learning model, the green stars are the essays that you give a 1 to. The red dots are the ones you give a 2 to. So you get a whole lot of humans, Mechanical Turk, to grade a large number of essays, 500 or 1,000 essays. So when the next essay comes into the machine, it's able to say, oh, it's similar statistically in terms of the language that's there. Therefore, this is an A or a B or a C or a D. So that's an application of that. The reason why I gave that lead-up history Excuse me, folks. I've had a bit of a cold, so I'm coughing a little bit. My apologies. At least you're not in the same room as me. This is an absolutely fundamental technological shift. And it happens, it's described there in this Voswani article of 2017. It's the transformer. And what the transformer does, it takes large language model, which is a huge corpus, and it looks at the relative relationship of words, right? I'm going to qualify that a little bit in a second. So what it is, it's in fact a model of the world as modeled in the whole, just about the whole of the human published experience, right? And looks at the, and it's about predicting the next word after a prompt. And so it's based, and the basic concept is a weight, the relationship of these words. So, by the way, this is 200 lines of code only, and it's actually moved programming, and we know this from watching Claude Code and all these other coding software now. It's moved coding into the space of essentially of natural language. Now, what's big about this? We had in the 15th century in Europe, but before that in the 11th century in China, the invention of movable type, which changed the world. It made mass literacy possible, supported mass inequality too, I might say. So these things are always complicated, darn inventions. The Chinese invention wasn't widely generalized, but Gutenberg's invention of the 15th century became widely generalized. This was a technology for the mechanical reproduction of texts. What's very new about generative AI is the mechanical production of texts. So both humans and generative AI can make meaning from the endless possibilities of language. So we have a grammar which has nouns and verbs and stuff, and we can substitute nouns and verbs with any range of semantic possibilities, infinite possibilities. And generative AI can do that as well. But they have fundamentally different mechanisms for taming these infinities. Now, what's the mechanism and why is language important? So here what we have is that this technology works with tokens. How do we get to tokens? Well, firstly, we operate with the universal scripting system, which is Unicode, which operates in every language and some symbol system, includes emojis and a whole lot of symbolic representations of the world. And what it does, I said these are binary notation machines. There's the binary coding for the word, the block letter A in Unicode, a series of zeros and ones. So this is not actually just statistical. This is simply a hugely expansive naming system, because you can actually put together these graphemes. And what they consist of in a language like Portuguese or a language like English is both phonemes and ideographs. So phonemes are sound contrast represented in text. Ideographs are actually concepts. A Chinese character or a number is actually a concept. Now, in fact, to operate at the binary level or to operate at the grapheme level would be impossible. So what they, just even with today's computing power. So what they do is the compression mechanism that's used in LLMs is to cluster phonemes into tokens. So a token is actually a semantic unit. So see, I've got there the word walked. That's actually two tokens. Walk is one, and ED is a marker which says it's in the past tense. And statistically, going through a large language model or analyzing all the text, these are frequently encountered character combinations, WALK and ED. And therefore, that's how tokens are formed. It's called tokenization. But in fact, what those tokens are is actually morphemes. So what we want to do is our own way to describe this is a text semantic space. It's actually a semantic space because each of these units, by virtue of the frequency of its appearance, represents a unit of meaning. And by the way, interestingly, vis-a-vis literacy, math and code are equally writing because they're represented in Unicode. But what we end up with in the LLM, though, is, again, this is our pushback against artificial intelligence, is collective intelligence, not artificial intelligence. So the humans have written all this stuff, and because it's actually published text, it's premeditated and explicit and carefully crafted. in a way that perhaps oral interactions are not. And it's there for the taking. It's there. And by the way, they go ahead and take it. Doesn't matter about intellectual property or who owns it or copyright. It's there for the taking because this is the digitized corpus. Then what they do is they do self-supervised learning. So to develop the vectors, between each of these words, so walk down the street, walk plus down plus street frequently appear together. The machine does self-supervised learning and builds the weightings between tokens based on pre-training. Again, these are learning machines, but this is self-supervised learning during the pre-training process. Then there's fine-tuning, which is reinforcement learning with human feedback. Which is basically, telling the machine how to talk, the right kind of answers that to be given. And again, this is hugely labor intensive. Then there's the meta prompt, where the company humans tell the LLM how to speak through the chatbot. Then there's a user prompt. Nothing happens till the user makes a prompt. And then after the prompt, there are chatbot refinements, chain of thought reasoning, agentive AI, which is the machine actually talking to itself. But the reason why I put this list here is that this is an accretion of a lot of collective acts in the human experience. And it's not just the machine that's doing this stuff. It's the capturing of the semantics of the human experience across a huge range of texts, which are published texts. What's really interesting, to be quite frank, and this is a tangent which I can't go into, is how incredibly well this works across different languages. So although the corpus is dominated by large languages like English and Chinese, multilingual LLMs are very good at languages with smaller corpora. And the reason why, essentially, is because they transfer these universal human semantics across language to language. So that's a fascinating kind of tangent. This is the point that Rodrigo made so nicely. They're so different that to use the same word is a travesty. Everything goes through binary notation. The brain's more than binary. We feel things, we smell things, we sense things, we cry about things, we laugh about things. Bodies are more than brains. And of course, contexts are more than bodies, which is, we live in a world where things and spaces and objects have meanings which are not just representable in text. Artificial and general intelligence, probably a bit of a terrible idea because it's, we're talking about these two very, very different things. And this is the model that we propose for cybersocial learning. So we've got human learning over here. We've got machines which are capable of learning by all those mechanisms that I showed you before. And that it's a relationship of the cyber and the social in these kinds of ways. There's a reference down there in the right-hand corner to a piece that we've written about that. Now, moving now on to the second area of this talk. This immediately, so the first part, as I said, what I was trying to do is speak theoretically and speak linguistically and speak sociologically and speak not too technically about how these things work and what they do. But it's a problem for education because we've got a machine that can do human thinking. The word that's often used now is cognitive offloading. But more brutally, there's an English scholar of digital learning by the name of Mike Sharples. He calls this democratizing cheating. So what he means by that is that there's an estimate that before generative AI in US higher education, 15% perhaps of submitted assignments were written in paper mills. Paper mills are people in the developing world who for $100 will give them your essay topic and they'll write the essay for you. But now, AI makes it incredibly cheap. And interestingly, AI detectors don't work, but even if to the extent they do, you can get these apps here which make your work completely undetectable. It's a kind of an arms race. So what do we do when we have a machine which can do all of student work? What do we do? Well, there is a solution, and my next slide is the definitive solution, and this is all you need to do. And unfortunately, this is what is happening a lot of the time. Now, we can laugh at this perhaps, but it's actually not a laughing matter. This is what people are doing more and more. But the question is, in reaction to generative AI, I might say, what's bad about this as a theory of learning? Well, firstly, it's individualized memory. They can't talk to each other. They can't look anything up. But when in fact, look, we live in a world where, we look things up, we reference things, we check things, we talk to our fellow students, we argue about things, we dialogue things. So to reduce learning to individual memory is actually crazy, because knowledge and learning is intrinsically social. But let me say one more thing about this, and that is that that we live in a digital world now where, in fact, there's too much to be known. We rely on our devices to look things up on our phone, look things up on our iPads. It's really increasingly anachronistic to think that long-term memory is the goal of education. The other thing is a very mechanical thing about writing. I don't know about you, but I'm just not very good at handwriting anymore, and I don't like handwriting because I've got so used to a keyboard. I mean, we've been writing on computers now for 40 years and more. The word processor is a ubiquitous device. I'm used to writing things roughly, badly, going back and refining them, rethinking them, working back over them. And handwriting is really resistant to that. So it's not a great medium for representing your thinking when we become very used to these highly flexible, recursive keyboarding processes. This is the AI arms race point, but treating kind of trivializes a more serious problem. The more serious problem is the whole question of cognitive offloading. These are things that AI can do well now. I'm thinking about higher ed, I'm thinking about research, literature search and review. I use the AIs for this all the time now. Ideation, I argue with the damn things about things which are difficult ideas, and I get thoughts from them. You can put data analysis in for coding, interpretation, discourse analysis, drafting, translation, if you're working not in your first language. So what we're arguing is that we need to move away from detection towards transparency and disclosure. Some last thoughts about these differences. I won't go through this in any detail because, again, Rodrigo and Karina have mentioned this very, very well. These are profound differences in which generative AI is genuinely much, 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 much better at a lot of things than humans are. But also humans are, think in a different way, do other things better and differently. I think it's important to keep that in mind. Last part now of the talk, I'm going to jump out of here and I'm going to show you into the Cyber Scholar space. This is Cyber Scholar. This is our White Rabbit. We have a White Rabbit assistant in there, which sometimes these screen sharing things don't like showing the White Rabbit, but because it's a kind of a pop-up kind of thing, but I'll give it a go. And I'm going to jump out now and show you into that. So let me just go here. I'm showing my whole screen. So I believe this should work. And what I will do is I will do this. So can everybody see that? Someone shout out if you can or you can't.
We are seeing your presentation, but not the page you are sharing.
Okay, stop sharing. I'll do it again. Thank you. I'm glad I asked. I'll go and reshare then. Where do I find it? Over here. So I'll go here. I'm going to go share screen. I'm going to go share screen. I'm going to go here. I'm going to show Chrome tab. Actually, I'll just show that one. Okay. All right then. So can you see that okay now?
Can. Yes, we can.
Great. I'll size it down so it's possible to, it won't be so small. And I'm going to log you in now. Oh, by the way, this is, if people are interested, there's a website, cyberscholar.ai, but I'm going to log you into the actual application now. And this was the screen that Rodrigo showed us before. So if I'm a learner, I only see these two things here, which is my works and my projects. If I'm a teacher, I can manage projects, I can create knowledge bases. Again, Rodrigo mentioned that, create rubric agents. We now have a survey module as well. So this is the login, but I'm going to take you into one particular work. I'm going to take you into an existing work written by one of our doctoral students. So this is, let me just size it up so it's a bit more, a bit clearer for everybody. Okay, maybe I've sized it a bit too far. Okay, so this is somebody who happens to be writing about station rotation in tailored AI, and it's multimodal. They put in, you know, videos and all that kind of thing. So it's a full kind of text. This is a text editor where you can do all the things you'd want to do with there in the toolbar. But what's unusual about it is that while you're writing, what you can do is you can call up Cyber Helper. So what if I am worried about, what if I'm worried about this issue and I want the which is I must maintain effective communication and keep track of my junior progress, maintaining constant communication with parents or guardians, not only cognitive but also emotional needs. Right. So I want to think about this idea. What I go do is I go over to Cyber Helper and I can brainstorm the idea. I can research the idea. I can plan if this is an idea that I want to keep on working on. I can expand on it. I can summarize it if it's too long. I can translate. These things are fully multilingual. They move backwards and forwards seamlessly between languages. And they explain what they're doing in the translation, to be quite frank, which fits with translanguaging principles. Check the flow, advise, proofread, just ask a question, for example. So what I can do is I can brainstorm this and then I can run an answer to that question. I can qualify this over here as well. But look, I'm actually not going to do that now because, you know, it'll come up here and I can keep on dialoguing with it when it, after I run that text. Now, let's move on quickly and let's say now I finished writing my whole work and we have another. So the Cyber Helper is while I'm working, I can have all those functions working. And by the way, what we're doing is we're keeping a record of the way in which you've interacted with the AI. We want you to interact with the AI. We want you to learn from the AI, but we're keeping a record of that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to run a cyber review. Okay, so here, and I'm going to show you a couple of aspects of this. Firstly, we have what's called rubric agents. So here, rubric agents are agents which look at a work from different evaluative perspectives. So we have here a rubric library, all sorts of rubrics that, you know, a teacher can make their own rubrics, but we will just go back to where we were. I'll actually, let me just see if I can find the one there. No. I'm going to just close this up. Right, so this particular rubric is one that we've created about learning technologies and pedagogy and all that kind of stuff for this particular piece of work. The next thing we can do is we can, and by the way, I'm doing this now because we've allowed the student to do it, but you can also, the teacher can set all these things. You can also then choose a foundation model. So this is not connected to any particular foundation model. This might be OpenAI GPT 5.1. We've got Grok, we've got Quen, which is Alibaba, a Chinese one, Kimi, one of the Chinese ones, Anthropic, Claude Sonnet, Mistral is the French one. We actually, NVIDIA's got a new one as well. We have all the publicly available AIs there. I am going to, which one am I going to put in now? Because I want one that operates pretty quickly. Let me just see. I'll leave it on GPT 5.1, which is not the latest model, but it'll run a bit faster. The other thing is, and Rodrigo mentioned this, which is we have a knowledge base. So here, this particular knowledge base, I can build a knowledge base. So let's say the assignments on cell biology, I put in 10 cell biology textbooks. Let's say the assignments on the history of the Spanish Empire, I put in a whole lot of resources. So whatever subject I'm operating in, I can build a knowledge base, which then customizes the information, particularly for the work that's involved. Now, I'm going to start generating the review. And what happens here is a huge amount of computation is going on. So what it's doing, these are the 10 rubric agents. In fact, these are the 10 rubric agents that we've created. And what it's doing against each of these criteria, it's going back into the work and it's looking at the way in which you've addressed each of these criteria and giving you feedback. Now, again, let me tell you something about this knowledge base that we've got up here. Knowledge bases can be really huge. This particular knowledge base here is everything that we've written as professors about these subjects and education and technology and the like. Everything all our masters and doctoral students have written for the last 5 years. And actually it's about 35 million tokens, which is 32 million words. So this is a highly specialized knowledge base, which will give very specific feedback, which you wouldn't get from the generic LLM. So it's working through that now, and it's going to take a minute or two to get to the end. I want to wait till it gets to the end because I want to show you what the results like. So again, what has we've found kind of quite remarkable, to be quite frank, is this phenomenal amount of computation. So down in the foundation model is some massive number, trillions of parameters, which is what parameters are is relationships between words. In our knowledge base, it's what's called vectorizing. So we've taken all this material and we've tokenized it and given it all weights. That's, by the way, for folks who are kind of interested, it's a process called retrieval augmented generation. So that's our knowledge base. But then our rubric agents, if you like, are kind of personas. This is a conceptual persona. This is a theoretical persona. This is a persona of critique. These are kind of agents which have perspectives on this particular knowledge as it goes along. And we've got one here which will summarize it as well. So I'm very closely at the point where I can show you the feedback. And let me say, look, one thing I want to say kind of in advance that's kind of shocked us. Here we are. Firstly, there's a review summary where we can go down to things which summarizes the feedback. Top areas needing improvement. Reasoning and critique need deeper analysis. Critical engagement with equity, human differences is a thing. Communication and polish require attention. Overall assessment. So this is a kind of a summary view. But if I want to go into a lot of detail, the strengths, the clear, concrete data about your classroom context. Very accurate about what it is that you're talking about. Weaknesses. The discussion of prior experience stops at a fairly general level. You should mention using technology in blended learning. Now, let's say, for example, I've never heard of blended learning. So I'm going to go down the bottom here and I can start a discussion. Okay, so I'm going to ask that question. So, so what happens now is it will, I can talk to this. And in fact, what we say with this is talking to the collective intelligence of the rubric agents and knowledge base that we, as teachers, as professors, as instructors, have created. And this is explaining face-to-face learning online. Blah, 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 blah. This is blended versus fully online. This is all. So what I can do is I can then discuss this. Now, again, what I say is, look, firstly, as a professor, I could never give this much feedback. I wouldn't have the capacity or the time to give this much feedback. But in fact, the feedback you're getting there is the collective intelligence that we built into the machine around the knowledge base, around the rubric agents. So in fact, it's a version of us that's speaking. It's not just, the foundation model, OpenAI, that's speaking. The other one thing I want to say as well is one of the tricks is to make the rubric agents very, very explicit and very, very clear. So this is what we're looking for here. One last thing is multilingual. Let's say Arabic, for want of a better word, for want of a better thing. So if, let's say, English is not my first language, I'm an Arabic speaker, it will do that. And what it will do, it will kind of explain, even, you can see here, it's going to explain the connections between the English concepts, which may not occur in Arabic in the same way. So it's genuinely a translanguaging platform. I will show you briefly the assistant. This here is a little assistant, and this often doesn't work in these kind of things here. But what I can do is I can say to the assistant, could you explain to me, please, what I do next? Is it going to talk to me? Yeah, it's connecting. Yeah.
Hi, Bill. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we have only 10 minutes left.
I'm finished. And I can do this in any language. Okay, there we go. So that's the last part of my talk, and I am going to stop now. So I'll quit here and over to you, folks. Okay, thanks everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Will. What an amazing presentation. Now, I would like to invite all of our panelists back, Karina and Rodrigo, to join us for the question and answer section. We have some questions from our viewers, so we're running out of time, but we can share only one answer, one question or two, right? And Felipe Cardoso wants to know if everything we add in AI feeds the AI back, then those transformative agencies are more valuable to improve the quality of generated content. What do you guys think? Who would like to start? Bill, would you like to answer that?
Just trying to interpret the question. So if everything we add in an AI feeds the AI back, then those transformative agents are more valuable. Yes. So what happens is it's about extending human capacity, about deepening feedback, about deepening thinking, all of those things. But as you can see, is even the AI side of things is a deeply human process. We've built the environment so it will do that. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, Philippe.
Yes, that's great. Karina, Rodrigo would like to add something, or can we move on to the next question? Okay, so the next question is from Jaine. She says, when thinking about the social impacts of AI, what kinds of inequalities do you believe may be reinforced or transformed in your educational context?
Okay, I can answer quickly, but then I know Karina and Rodrigo might want to chip in. The biggest barrier is the cost of these things. So some of them are available for free at the moment, but in fact they're deeply uneconomical for free. They use probably what you just saw me do. Might have cost the company, might have cost us $1, might have cost the company more than that because they're losing huge amounts of money. And we can see already that the main AIs are putting their prices up. Claude, Anthropic's put its prices up recently. So it can get kind of expensive. So one of the problems is who can afford it. That's essentially what it would be. Interestingly today, also just on the news today, the only American open access AI was Llama, which is Facebook, and their new model is no longer free. So there, there's going to be a thing about who gets the more powerful AIs. The Chinese ones are still open access and free. How long it'll be, I don't know.
Oh, that's great. Karina, would you like to add something?
Yes, I can say something else. First of all, I thought about the digital access gaps. That Bill mentioned that when he talked about value. And I also think that we can either reinforce the divide or it can become a tool for educational justice. It all depends on how we use it. In terms of when I think of teachers, if the teachers are well prepared, AI can be a really helpful hand. But if teachers are not prepared, they are not going to make use of it. So we might have those who have access versus those who don't. So we may increase a social asymmetry that we already have between those who have access to education, those who have access to teacher education, those who don't, or public versus private schools. When I think of Brazil as a country, this was what I was thinking about.
Oh, that's great. Rodrigo, what are your thoughts on the topic? Do you have any comment? Would you like to add something?
No, thank you.
Okay. So we've reached the end of our panel. It's been a wonderful exchange of knowledge. And I would like to once again thank our panelists, Karina, Bill, Rodrigo, who has been following the presentations. Now I invite Anthony Satiro to I hand it over to Anthony Satiro to finish this panel.
So, thank you, Rai. On behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to thank you for your incredible mediation of the panel. And also, thank you, the panelists, for your amazing presentations, and also everyone who is joining us live and those who may be watching this recording at a later time. Before finishing, just a quick reminder, that our next panel is about to begin. It starts at 4 p.m. and will be conducted in Portuguese. The panelists are Dr. Janaína Melo from Federal University of Sergipe, Brazil, Dr. Débora Arruda from State University of Ceará, Brazil, and Dr. Raquel Recuero from Federal University of Pelotas, Brazil. Thank you again, and that's it.
Aprovado pelo Departamento de Letras Estrangeiras da Universidade Federal de Sergipe e certificado pelo CNPq. O Grupo Tecla é uma referência em inovação e pesquisa. Atuamos na intersecção entre tecnologias, educação e linguística aplicada, transformando o aprendizado de forma dinâmica. Nossos pilares são práticas educativas inovadoras, pesquisas interdisciplinares e soluções para demandas sociais. Exploramos inteligência artificial e inteligência artificial generativa, revolucionando o ensino e a aprendizagem. Além disso, participamos ativamente de iniciação científica, mestrado e doutorado em educação, promovendo colaboração e inovação. Tecla, transformando linguagens, educação e tecnologia. Junte-se a nós!